Hello everyone, welcome, and thank you for coming back to Listening In, the National Counselling and Psychotherapy Society podcast. My name is Faye Blackwell, and I am the Head of Engagement and Development here at the Society. In this series, we want to provide the opportunity for you to listen in to some of the conversations that I'm lucky enough to have every day. That is, with a variety of wonderful people and organisations, all working in the field of mental health and well-being. Today, I'm talking to Tony Kelly, ex-professional footballer and now founder and managing director of Red Card Gambling, an organisation that promotes education, awareness and prevention for anyone affected by problem gambling. In our conversation, Tony openly talks about how he became addicted to gambling, the impact it had on his life, his career, and his loved ones. How does a young man at the height of a career he has fought so hard for find himself homeless and bankrupt? And importantly, how does he start again and rebuild his life? Recorded on the 9th of September 2024, the day before World Suicide Prevention Awareness Day, please be aware the topic of suicide is mentioned in this episode.
So growing up in Coventry, and big family, 6 boys, 1 girl, but there was always football on the telly. And not as much as it is now, but there was football on the telly, and all the boys were all obsessed with football, myself included. So it's sort of triggered. The trigger came in 1974, which is what's clearly in my mind, when I was 8 years old and watching Brazil in the 74 World Cup. So that's what inspired me to want to be a footballer.
Ah, okay.
It was all about the yellow kit. It was all about people that don't know football won't know anything about this, but the Jarzinos, the Revelinos, the Pelé just before. So for me, that it's an inspiration for me. It was a trigger for me in terms of, this is what I want to do. So it was fast forward a few years into secondary school. Obviously playing football locally for a local team, and then playing from a school team. And then obviously like today, young lads that are 13, 14, 15 are aspiring to be footballers, then there's different pathways. Takes a bit of luck. And I was fortunate enough that when I left school at 16, I was offered what they call today a scholarship. I was offered an apprenticeship at Bristol City. So my dream was very close to becoming reality. So I signed for Bristol City. I had to move home and go and live in digs. Fortunately, I had a twin brother. Well, I have a twin brother, and so he's still here. I have a twin brother, 20 minutes apart. So it was good for me in terms of company. So I wasn't alone. I know a lot of young lads leave home, today to go and sign for a club, 4 or 5 hours away from family and friends. So it wasn't so difficult because I was with my twin brother, stayed in lodgings with a lovely family. And then that was the start of my journey in terms of, hopefully becoming a professional footballer.
So you're at what age at this point, Tony?
16.
Okay, goodness. Gosh, okay.
Things started well in terms of the development. So I was playing for the first team. I had a record where I played for the first team of Bristol City, the youngest player to play for the first team at 16, 244 days. So obviously all my friends back home in Coventry said, "It's amazing, Tony's going to be a superstar, blah, blah." Yeah, it was a great start. But, like many young people, we get carried away with things. We're obviously still a little bit immature, still haven't grown up. And then I was doing things that weren't, appropriate for a scholar or an apprentice at 17 years old, going out nightclubbing, for instance, with senior players, coming in at 3 a.m, all those kind of things. So I had the talent, but I didn't have the attitude to go with it. So sadly, 6 months before my 18th birthday, I was told by the club that they're going to release me. And dream was shattered.
Oh, goodness.
Dream was shattered. Went back to Coventry with my tail between my legs. Obviously, everyone's surprised because of the quick start that I made in the development. Everyone's surprised that I didn't get a professional contract. So it's a question of, what do you do next? Like hundreds and thousands of young players that get released from football clubs today, they go in different pathways. They go on the streets or whatever it is. And for me, I still had a burning desire to be a professional. Okay, it didn't happen at that moment, but to me, in my mind, I was not going to give up. So the decision was made to move to London when my sister was living in London, southeast London. And I moved to London to live with my sister, signed for what we call semi-professional football club. So if you're in the Midlands, you might be in Eatonborough or Bedworth or whatever. So I signed for Dulwich Hamlet in southeast London as a semi-professional, which meant that obviously you train twice a week, you play on a Saturday, and you get a job. So I got a job in security. So I just played semi-professional football for the next 4 years in the hope that, scouts come to a lot of semi-professional football games looking for players to pick up. And I was, again, fortunate that I got spotted playing for St Albans City in Hertfordshire. I got spotted at 22. For some people, they say, oh, you get to 20, 21, forget it, you can't make it then, you're too old. But no, there's hundreds of players that have turned professional from semi-professional football at 21 and 22 and 23. So, yeah, my big break came, when I was 22, and Stoke City came in. And before I know it, I've gone from being a postman, because I've moved on from security to being a postman, to all of a sudden being a fully-fledged professional football in the second division of English football.
Goodness.
Yeah, so it was crazy. And I want to rewind slightly, because in terms of the journey with professional football, and obviously my journey with gambling addiction, which we're going to touch upon later, but it coincided that when I did sign for Dulwich Hamlet, that was the start of my gambling, because there was a betting shop across the road where some of the senior players were going across to do their football bets. And we talk about reasons why people start gambling, and for me, there was a couple of reasons. One was obviously, financial gain. I've seen the players winning money on their football coupons and all that, so curiosity, but also a bit of peer pressure, because I came from Coventry, and there was a group of lads that are senior players, 5 or 6 of them, 22, 23. I'm only 18, and I wanted to find a sense of belonging. I wanted to join in with the group. Feel more at home. I was really shy at 18, coming from Coventry, all the Cockney banter. You had to be mentally strong to be in that particular dressing room, because that's the way it was at London them times. So I had to try and find a way to fit in.
That's so interesting. Yeah.
And that was my way, just to fit in that little group, join them, go across the road, put the football bets on, and become part of that group.
So it was actually quite a social aspect to it for you. I don't think I've ever sort of considered it in those terms before. I suppose some people, if I were to relate to that, I'd say perhaps back in the day when I was much younger, that's why I started to smoke when I tried my first cigarette, was to be part of, a group of people and to feel comfortable in that.
And I think young lads and young girls do all kinds of things, whether it's smoking weed, whatever it is, just to feel that sense of belonging. And I felt, and it gave me more confidence. But that was the start of having football bets every Saturday. Every time I turn up at the ground, half an hour before kick-off, before we're meant to be at the ground, going across the bookers with the 6 guys or whatever, put our football bets on, and then go into the dressing rooms and get ready for the match. So that's how it all started in terms of gambling itself.
So there's lots of positive reinforcement there. You're feeling more confident, you're feeling part of the group, and at times there is that financial gain that comes from winning a bet.
Yeah. Exactly. Mm-hmm. And so, as I said, I spent 4 years. Well, I spent about a year at Dulwich Hamlet. And so when I moved across to North London, because I was in South London then, when I moved across to North London to Enfield, where I joined St Albans City Football Club, which is Hertfordshire down the road, obviously the gambling was still continuing. So by now, I'm putting more bets on. It's become more regular. I'm doing it midweek. It's slowly escalating without you really realising it. So you're putting on more bets. Obviously, the more you lose, the more money you're going to need. So it might come out of my wages. It might come from family. It might be asking friends to borrow me money. So there was a slow escalation, but you get wrapped up in it. And it's literally, over a period of time, it literally grabs hold of you and grips you. And it's hard to let go of that grip. So, before I know it, when I did sign for Stoke at 22, I wasn't a gambling addict at that point, but I had a problem. I was gambling quite a lot, and obviously when I signed for Stoke, with that came a hell of a lot more money. I remember,
of course.
So obviously I've gone from, as I said earlier, I've gone from being a postman to all of a sudden the second division professional footballer. You can imagine the monies that I was on back then. This was 1990. So more money, big signing on fee. I think I got £20,000 in 1990, which obviously was a hell of a lot of money compared to today. And so, then it escalated in terms of doing different types of gambling. Online gambling wasn't around then. So it was bookmakers and casino. So I then went from the bookmakers every day after training. That was the main source of my gambling, being the bookmakers after training. And then it was casinos in the evening, sometimes casinos in the day as well.
Do you mind me asking, Tony, at that point then, you've identified that the issue had escalated to some degree, although not necessarily noticeable or conscious to you. By the time you've reached Stoke, are you now just doing that by yourself, or is it still part of a group of people that you're all doing this together? Is it still a social aspect to it, or has it just become you're trotting off by yourself to the betting shop?
Excuse me, it was both, because even today, and everyone, ex-players and all that, will tell you the same thing about there was always a social element to gambling and football. So, for example, when we go to away trips on the coach, 3 or 4 hours away, there'll be 5 or 6 players gambling at the back of the coach, playing 3-card brag. So that was normal. So there's a group element to it that would happen at every club I've been at, which is 6 clubs. Every club had the same sort of element in terms of 6 or 7 players that love to bet, that will go to the bookers together, that will gamble on the coach. So that was always there. But I also done it on my own in my own time, because now it's consumed me. I didn't really need anybody with me. I was spend all day at the casino, spend all day in the bookers. It was a case of that. Once you got to past that initial start of the gambling journey, in terms of where I was curious and where I was wants to feel that sense of belonging, 4 years on, then I would go anywhere on my own and just be comfortable on my own.
I know you might only be able to answer this on reflection. I don't know if you would have done so at the time, but were you aware of constantly thinking about it too? Was it affecting your life in that sense? If you were playing, for example, if you're training, you'd be thinking of going to place a bet.
I couldn't wait, I'm a professional footballer. My main focus is supposed to be on my profession. But in my mind, I couldn't wait till training finished, because back then we start about 10 o'clock, be out the ground by 1 o'clock, and I couldn't wait to get into the bookies. I literally couldn't wait. So it was always constantly on my mind.
It says so much about those compulsive behaviours, doesn't it? Because when you look back to when you mentioned about being let go from Bristol City, and you're only 18 years old, and you'd had all of that expectation and excitement around you from friends and family back in Coventry, you are finding yourself, being signed by a club and everything you dreamed of, and then being let go. I can't imagine what that must feel like to an 18-year-old, that level of rejection, your dreams being crushed in that sense. And yet what you've described brilliantly is the ability to pick yourself up and go, I'm not going to let this stop me. I'm going to just forge on, and I'm going to keep going. So that desire and that passion for football was there to such a degree for you, wasn't it? And yet when you reach the level of Division 2, you're there at Stoke, gambling is now really vying for that energy and attention, isn't it? Despite how hard you had worked for the football. Yeah,
and I think when you talk about the journey in terms of getting release and that rejection, when I look at myself today, I know we'll go more into the details where I am today, but I think resilience has always been something that's been within me in terms of everything that I've done up to today. So for me, continue going to non-league football for 4 years, training on Tuesday and Thursday night. You'd have to go to work or finish the security shift at 6 o'clock, and then have to go train at 7 o'clock in the evening, get back at 10 o'clock, knackered, get back up 6 o'clock in the morning to go to work. So these kind of sacrifices I had to do if I wanted to, continue playing professional at a certain level, and if I wanted to be, get picked up at some point by a scout, which obviously happened when I was 22. So I think that was a big part of my character that's always been there. But when it comes to the gambling, when they talk about it consuming you, it literally really does. And that's on a daily basis. you know, finishing training. So I finished training at the bookmakers. So that, you know, finish training, go to bookmakers 1 o'clock, do all the racing till 5 o'clock, and then I'll be off to the casino. So it'd be hours and hours. We always say the one thing that gambling takes is your time, but that is so true. You can't get that time back. But I spend hours, and I'll come back maybe 11, 12 o'clock at night, whatever. Sometimes it'd be through the morning, and obviously, you know, blowing your wages, etc. And when I was saying about escalation, so what I was working and playing non-league football, yes, you know, I didn't have loads of money, etc. But I'd take out a couple of loans here, a couple of payday loans there, borrow a bit of money off friends. But once it gone past the problem and it now becomes an addiction, meaning that it's consumed me and I'm dependent on it now, that's when other things come into play in terms of, you know, seriously financial debt, in terms of taking out lots and lots of loans, maxing out credit cards, you know, borrowing. You lose friends along the way because you borrow money off certain people and don't pay them back. So there's lots of issues that start to come into play, you know, such as the finance, such as the mental health, such as impact on family members, you know, falling out with friends. All these things start coming into play as you're going on this journey. You would never have thought of these things when you started that journey, but as you're going through it, there's so many things that start to happen. Coping mechanisms, whatever it is. I was on, you know, anxiety tablets, going to the doctors due to mental health issues, and just, you know, feeling anxiety and just all those things. There's so much that comes with a gambling addiction that people don't actually realise.
Did you realise at the time? Were you aware that it was? Listening to it, I have a sense of everything's become. I know this is a huge understatement, but you've got yourself into a massive pickle, you know, and I just have this sense of all these things coming in on you, and there's, you know, debts, and like you say, people are falling by the wayside, loved ones, people you care for. Were you aware at the time that was happening, or were you just ploughing on regardless? Were you starting to become concerned, do you feel?
I think I was aware of that I have a problem, but I wasn't. I think the biggest thing for me, because obviously, you know, family members or one or two friends would say, "Oh, be careful with your gambling. Watch what you're doing." You know, I'd get advice from certain people that are close to me and all that, because they can see what's going on if I'm borrowing money every week or every month or whatever it is. Obviously, going to the doctors for those anxiety tablets, I think it was beta blockers or something they put me on because I was having panic attacks while I was at home. And obviously, because, you know, the anxiousness of my car being repossessed the next day or something like that, I've lost 2 houses, so the build up to those in terms of getting eviction dates. So all these things that I'm having to go through mentally. The crazy thing about it is that even though I'm going through all these things, and even though I know that, as you say, I'm going to pick up in a massive hole and you can't get out of this hole, I'm finding it difficult to get out of this hole. Even though I'm aware of all this, it doesn't stop me gambling. And that's the scary side of it, in terms of, you know, that's why I say to people that you have to get professional help. You're not going to wake up in the morning and decide you're not going to gamble. You know, once it's ingrained in you, once it's consumed you, then it's a serious issue that has to be professionally dealt with. And the big thing for me, which will be the same with all problem gamblers when they go on this journey, you talk about all the friends and family that's maybe give me advice or say careful, or you talked about how am I aware what's going on, is that you stay in this denial. You know, you are in constant denial, and so the shame and stigma that comes with it. I can't tell friends and family certain things, and, you know, what's really going on. I can only tell them little snippets and all that, because, you know, there is an element of shame to it. You don't want to be talking about it openly, so you hide it and you stay in denial, and that's what you do. So you have to go along that journey, fighting it in secret, until, you know, most people say when people with a gambling addiction, generally speaking, will only come out of denial at some point. It has to be something drastic that happens, you hit rock bottom, whatever it is, and everyone will have that rock bottom at some point, and then they'll go and source help when it's all too late.
Sounds like a really lonely place to be for somebody where the beginnings of this was about a sense of belonging and a sense of comradeship with your fellow players. You find yourself a few years down the line in a, you know, quite an isolated and lonely place, and gambling, I'm wondering, then becomes that consistent, reliable, in inverted commas, friend, doesn't it? It's the one thing you can again, that word depend upon.
Definitely, and that's how I found myself. I was completely dependent upon it. I had to have a bet every morning, every day. First thing I thought about in the morning was, can I get to the bookers on time? Can I get to the bookers straight after training? I'll finish training as quick as I can. So little things like normally, players will stay around and have a chat or something, or go down the pub and play pool or whatever. I would be changed within 10 minutes, out, showered and out the door, because it's literally consumed me. I can't wait to have that bet. So yeah, that's the mindset you're in. Unfortunately, when you're consumed with a gambling addiction, it takes over your whole mind and takes over your whole life.
Was your playing affected? Was work affected by that?
Yeah, and again, simply because of the denial factor, in all the 6 clubs I played at, I never once went to the manager. There was lots of times where, players and managers that have managed me will say the same things in terms of, I could never work Tony out. One week he was brilliant, the next week he was rubbish. They couldn't quite work out how my form was so sporadic. They tear their hair out, to be honest with you, some of the managers I played under. And that's because, my mind was not focused on my performances and all that. So, as you said earlier about, I'll go onto the pitch thinking about, my race is going to come in today, or my accumulator is going to come in today. They're the kind of thing that's going through my mind. So wasn't focused on football 100%. It did have an impact on the game, because signing for Stoke at 22 and then finishing professional football at the age of 30, I've lost 6-7 years to the game. The average age, 36, 37, that professional footballer will retire.
Okay.
So by the time I was 30, Leyton Orient was the last club. There was no other offers of contracts, many other clubs, etc. Managers speak within the game, coaches and scouts, they all speak within the game. They'll have know of my sporadic form and can't trust him, can't rely on him, blah, blah. So, had a huge impact in terms of the longevity of my career, which obviously lasted 8 years instead of probably 15 years. That's a real shame.
By the time that comes to an end, where are you at that point personally and in terms of the gambling?
So at that point, when I left Leyton Orient, I was in serious debt, real serious debt in terms of creditors. So it was 1998, in terms of the amount of creditors, the amount of debt that I accumulated, headspace, mentally not great, right in the midst of a gambling addiction. So from getting released at Leyton Orient and then going to what I call the real world, then I had to think, right, I've got to, what am I going to do now? So there was no plans about what I'm going to do. I'd have no idea what I was going to do. And I ended up going to Network Rail, roughly approximately 2 years later, in the year 2000, when I went to Network Rail. But obviously, still with the problem with gambling.
What started to change things for you?
The ironic thing about Network Rail is I was there from 2000 to 2010. And if a certain incident didn't happen, then I'd probably still be there today, because Network Rail is basically a job for life. Okay. Network Rail is a very, very well paid job, signaller. And so going through this gambling addiction after football, continuing, like I said, taking out loads of loans and credit cards, payday loans, you name it. I exhausted all avenues of borrowing off family members, etc. So this continued. And then basically in 2009, there was an incident at work on a Sunday while I was working with Network Rail. You work alone as a signalman. So I'm working in Dollis Hill signal box on my own. Majority is freight trains. Very, very quiet Sunday afternoon. And there was a train. Well, there wasn't any trains due, but there was engineers on the track doing some work on the track, and my job obviously is to block the line for safety reasons, etc. So I've done the certain manoeuvres in terms of signals and blocked the line, and then I had a call from one of the technicians on the track, called the signal box and said, "Oh, Tony, you've pressed the wrong button. You pulled the wrong lever. It's on the signal's on a green. Obviously supposed to be red." Mm-hmm. And I goes, sorry, it's only 2 seconds, like literally 3 or 4 seconds. It's just another lever to pull within the signal box. And I said, yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, my fault. And just corrected it straight away. No problem. 4 or 5 seconds. And then little did I know, the next day I had a visit from the regional manager, and I was disciplined. And I eventually took it to a tribunal, but to be honest with you, I didn't have a leg to stand on, because this is all about safety critical. So, and obviously in my signal box, I'm doing things like looking at the horses and on the phone to commentary. I was doing those kind of things. I'm ticking off horses and in the paper, what bets I'm going to do and all that. So, as I said, I'm going through the gambling addiction still. So I'm still thinking about it every single day. So I'm not, whatever I'm doing, whether it's football or whether it's a signalman, I'm not fully focused. And so I actually lost my job of 9 years simply through that lack of concentration, that lack of focus. Yeah, it might not be fully down to the gambling addiction, but obviously my mind is not focused. You don't make those kind of mistakes. These are serious. If there was a train coming, those guys are not protected. That's how serious it could have been.
Yeah.
So I left Network Rail, and then I was a little bit in limbo. Obviously, I've accumulated a huge amount of debt, and it's strange how certain things happen. But around the same time, within a year in 2000, within the same time, I was at Network Rail. Before I left Network Rail, I did have a visit from. And this is a real, I suppose, personal thing. It's not for everybody, but I did have a visit from the local Network Rail chaplain while I was at Network Rail. And this is not so long before I got the sack, but I had a visit from a Network Rail chaplain who came round. I've been there in 9 years, and I just said to him, well, I've never had a visit in the 9 years I've been here, so it's a bit strange. Showed me his ID. He said, yeah, your signal box has come as a regional visit. So I found it a little bit strange, but I said, fine. And he came into the signal box. And this is, as I said, at the height of my addiction. I'm just about to split up with the girlfriend of 20 odd years, I've had my house repossessed in Stoke. I'm in huge amounts of debt, well over 200 grand. So my life is a complete mess. And he came with a new Bible. We sat down, we talked for 2 hours. He wrote out a prayer, which I've still got to this day, which now know called the Salvation Prayer. And we just talked about life, where I am, hopes for the future, all those kind of things. And it was, and the whole idea really from his point of view was about regaining my faith. So when he left, it wasn't a case of that everything changed, instantly or anything like that. It wasn't like that at all, because obviously, the incident came and all that. And then the bankruptcy came in 2010, a year later, when I went bankrupt. So, but what happened with me on a personal level is that I did start to, read the scriptures. I did start to pick up the Bible. I did start to pray, all these little things. But I felt better within myself. And then from 2010 to 2013, it's a gradual thing, but I can't sort of pinpoint how I got to, decide about actually going public with my gambling addiction, because this happened in 2000, I think between 12 and 13. And I think the main source of it came from my sister. I think she said she read some snippets in the press about gamblers coming out from gamblers having problems with footballers having problems with their gambling addiction. So she said, you know what, you should put your story to print. This is what my sister said back in 2013. And obviously I'm in denial. I've been in denial for years and all that. And she supported me. She's bailed me out loads of times, just like other family members have. And she said, look, she's a head teacher as well at school in London. So she said, why don't you just write, a chapter from growing up in Coventry, age 9, aspiring to be a footballer, going to Bristol City, getting released, a rejection, your gambling addiction journey, and obviously your professional football career. So why don't you? So I'd done that, wrote a chapter, and then she said, yeah, this is amazing. So I thought, well, okay. And the strange thing is that once I started writing, I know psychotherapists and therapists talk about, whether it's cathartic and whether it's therapeutic and all these things. And I think there's an element of that for sure, because I couldn't stop writing. And it took me 18 months from start to finish with an A4 paper and a biro, no laptop, no computer, none of this ghost writing nonsense. I've done it for 18 months, non-stop, hours on end, through the night. Then before I know it, I had this massive manuscript. Told my sister, I said, you're not going to believe it, I've actually finished it. And she said, this is amazing. So then she said, she looked at it, she goes, this is amazing. We've got to get online. We sent it to lots of publishers. And then lo and behold, we had a call to say that they want to get this book published, and it came out on Amazon in 2014. So that was the start of the recovery, because with that publication of that book in 2014 came the media stuff. So I had a media agent, and we went on, in terms of really coming out of denial, in terms of, we talk about acceptance and owning your addiction, which eventually you will have to do. And I had to own it, had to accept it, had to acknowledge, right, I'm going to address this now head on. I'm going to get this, shame lifted off my shoulder. And I went on BBC Breakfast. And that was the start. That was the real start, because then everybody knows, family, friends, the nation, everybody knows. So I thought, yeah, let's do this.
That's extraordinary. That's extraordinary, Tony.
And I think what's amazing about, because I still, from time to time, every couple of months, I might go on YouTube and I'll sit there and I'll look and I'll listen and I think, wow, that's where I was. And it is strange looking at it from my perspective, looking at my TV screen, looking at myself talking 10 years ago. I think, bloody hell, look where I am. Because while I'm sitting on that red sofa, I don't know what the future holds. I have absolutely no idea. So when I'm looking at it now, and I'm sitting on that sofa talking to, I can't remember the presenters' names, but talking to them, and then I think, wow, just think, while I'm sitting there, I had no idea that I'm going to be author and blah, blah, and I'm going to be a CEO and the rest of it. But what really came from that interview, what really I think is really important for anybody that's listening to this, that's listening to other stories and testimonials, all that, about gambling addiction, about addiction in general, is I wasn't alone. That's because of the feedback in terms of emails and phone calls. Then I realised, wow, this gambling addiction is massive, because there's hundreds of thousands of people out there with the same problem. So that's what really brought it home to me in terms of the fact that I'm not going through this alone. This is happening all across the UK, blah, blah. And that's when we decided to set up the Red Card Project within 6 months to a year of the media stuff that I've done with the radio and TV, just to, follow on from the book, keep it a brand, hence why it's called Red Card Gambling Sport Project. So we kept the brand element to it, and that was incorporated in 2015. But part of that recovery process, in terms of going public, owning it, accepting it, was counselling. I always say to people that in terms of recovery, everybody's recovery journey is different. Today some might have CBT, some might have residential treatment, some might have GA. It's different for everybody. Mine was the family support, the regained faith, and counselling for about 6 weeks. But the counselling wasn't just about the gambling addiction. It was about everything in life in general, where I want to be in 5 years, family members, all those kind of things. So it really helped. The family really helped and stayed supportive. So you need that support network around you. I'm fortunate that I've got that. And then obviously also, which is, again, I mentioned earlier about the personal level, and you have to respect everybody's religions, everybody's beliefs. Everyone's got their own higher power, whatever makes them feel comfortable. My daughter's is more spiritual, so everybody's different in that sense. But the regain of my faith and that visit from the Network Rail chaplain in 2009, it told me that it was always going to be a gradual thing. It told me that particular day happened for a reason, that prayer was written for a reason, because 6 years later, in 2017, on June the 7th, 2017, I've got the big Bible at home, I got baptised in my local church in Enfield, North London. So I went full circle. It's as if to say, like, yeah, okay, you're on this, but you're at this particular place at the moment. This is what you're going through: the bankruptcy, the breakdown of a relationship, the repossession of your house, the £200,000 debt. You've got all that to live with. But, this is, again, I have to stress as a personal thing, but bringing God into my life, how things have happened in the last 7 or 8 years, it's just been, I can't even explain it. But the change in my life, the change in the journey, the change in me as a person as well, it's everything combined. Because like I said to you, if I would have told you after getting off that soap in 2014 on BBC Breakfast that I'm going to write 2 books, I'm going to be an author, I'm going to be public speaking across the country, I'm going to be here, there and everywhere, I would say, no, that can't be. Where's that going to come from? But here I am.
That resilience again.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the resilient bit even comes in with the setting up of Red Card, because as you know, it takes time to get established. We get knockbacks from funders. and all that. I remember one or two of my family members saying, oh, when we first started, this is going to be hard work, it's not going to be easy to get funding and all that kind of stuff. At the end of the day, I'm not giving up. This is what I want to do. I want to put, I want to make this something that, people can look back in years to come and say that, yeah, Red Carpet set up by Tony. Yeah, this is what they do. It's going to benefit thousands of people. And then eventually, as you know, we've been funded by various sources and it's growing and growing and growing.
I really, well, first of all, thank you for, we'll come on to Red Card in a second and talk more about all the different things you do, because I know there are many things you do now. But I do want to, first of all, just thank you for telling your story. And I really appreciate you saying your personal story. And that's fine. We understand that everybody has their own route, their own solution out of whatever difficulty they're facing. And I absolutely respect and acknowledge that that's your own very unique and personal story that you've told. And I feel very honoured to have heard that. So thank you for that. Do you mind if I just go back and just ask? I'm still not entirely sure. When that chaplain came and visited you, when you were still at Network Rail, did you tell him about your gambling or not? Or was that just a wider conversation about life in general, but you were still in that place at that point where you weren't quite able to tell anybody about what was happening for you?
I was still in that place. I was still in that place of denial.
Okay.
And that's the strange thing, because it's interesting that you say that, because it's as if he knew where I was, but without me telling him. That's the strange thing. And this prayer, I went to a church in Brecon in Wales. Don't know if you ever heard of Brecon.
Of course.
Oh, right, you have.
The Beacons, yeah, absolutely.
I actually never heard it until they emailed me and said, will you come to our church? And this was, I will send you the clip, but this was about 18 months ago. And they wanted me to come and share my story to the congregation. And I've done that. I'll send you the clip. I've done that to probably 120 people on a Sunday morning, drove up to Wales. And I went on, as part of my story, when I'm telling that bit, when I get to the bit where the intervention of the chaplain, I still have, it's all crumpled, but it's readable. I still have the prayer that he gave me that day. And at the bottom of the prayer, the last words at the bottom of the prayer, he writes, now arranged to get baptized. So this was in 2009. So I had to wait 8 years before I got baptized. And it's just crazy to think that he's wrote that, but it's took me 8 years to get to the point where he knows I've got to be. But yeah, I couldn't open up with him in terms of the personal stuff, because I wasn't at that place. As I said, I was going through the bankruptcy. The bankruptcy was the following year. And maybe again, what I was going to do with my debt at that time, in terms of all the creditors and bailiffs and obviously all the things that comes with financial ruin. Maybe the first step was that next year when I went bankrupt in 2010, because that was another huge lift off my shoulder, getting rid of those 32 creditors, £192,000 bankruptcy file. But I remember it's in my book, and I remember walking out of the High Court in London with my twin, and we just went to the pub and got smashed because I was so happy. It just knowing that's it. No more phone calls, no more letters, no more debt gone. And obviously, as you know, with bankruptcy, once you're bankrupt, you can't get credit. So obviously it has long-term impacts in terms of applying for jobs, etc., and those kind of things. But but that was meant to happen, that next step. And then it was 3 years later that we started to write the book and do the media stuff. So it was a progression, a gradual progression, that in my mind and my belief in my heart, that something was put in place in terms of me and my sister's very religious. In terms of that calling on that day, he's setting plans for the future, and those plans are plans that I have to work hard at. It's not given to me on a plate. I have to go out and go on different courses and network and this, that, the other, and a million one things I have to do. But that's the new pathway that I'm meant to be on.
So it sounds like the chaplain connected you with something in yourself and perhaps outside of yourself that seemed to really shift something for you so that over the next few years, you were then in that place where you were able to, as your sister invited you to do, write those thoughts down, write your story down. And maybe that was, if I understand correctly, your first telling of your story and your first admission to yourself as to what had happened to you. And it was from that moment that then the BBC Red Sofa comes and your whole life starts to take this change, with therapy as well. I know on your website even you say something along the lines of, without professional therapy, I wouldn't be here doing what I am now. So all of these things playing a part, being little threads into the Tony that sat in front of me here and now.
And I remember my first ever, sharing of my story publicly. And that was after the book came out in 2015, 14-15. But I had a friend in Coventry who runs a business gala event. It was at a hotel. It was a Black and Asian business gala event, which she runs every year. And just so happens that this particular event, they had a speaker down. Now, I'd never, ever done any public speaking at all in my life. But she said to me, your book has just come out. You've been able to be breakfast. People want to hear your story. And so she begged me. So I did have to get a table with 10 family members for the support, for the courage and all that. So we had a table of 10. But when I took the mic and went on there, it's only 15 minutes. That was the day that I realised that, people do want to hear this story. This resonates with a lot of people. People are coming up to me afterwards talking about finding their dad's betting slips in the bin and this, that, the other. Mm-hmm. And I thought, wow, this is huge. But it gave me the confidence to be able to, the courage and confidence to be able to say, you know what, people want to hear about this. We need to raise awareness. I'm going to talk about this. And I think that's where the old sharing of my story and being able to do public speaking initially started from.
Well, you talked a moment ago, didn't you, about the power for you of recognising that this wasn't just happening to you, that other people were struggling in this. And now you've turned that, haven't you? And you are that person telling your story. And when that reaches somebody that is struggling with similar challenges and is has a gambling problem or addiction, that they are also, through you, able to say, it's not just me. I'm not the only one. And that is so powerful. I really understand that. So let's talk a bit about Red Card. It's really important that we do that, and that you are able to help listeners understand exactly how you've turned these extraordinarily stressful, distressing events in your life into something so good, and into service for others that you're doing through Red Card Gambling Support.
Yeah, well, when we incorporated Red Card in 2015, it was a decision that initially we were going to go down the treatment route initially. Okay. We were going to get a pool of therapists. We had a place in London that we were going to use in terms of therapy rooms, and that was. But then we decided that education is, from our point of view, is more important. That we want to get people before they need support or need treatment. Mm-hmm. So we went down the education, prevention and awareness route. Took a while, from 2015 and 2017. I'd say those 2 years was the setup of Red Card in terms of the website, in terms of getting governance, in terms of getting directors together, and then creating whatever model we want to build, and then getting a team of facilitators. So that took probably 2 years, and obviously also applying for some funding, which initially was the Awards for All, the £10,000. That was the initial start of the funding process. Mm-hmm. But since then, since 2017, we've gone past 125 deliveries of gambling awareness workshops. Wow. And like you said, that can be secondary schools, it can be mental health charities, it can be football clubs, sports clubs, youth clubs, colleges, literally anywhere and everywhere we've been. We've been to businesses, we've been to for instance, Amy Construction, 35 employees and 5 staff. Last week we were at a mental health charity in Coventry. So we're somewhere different every week. Mm-hmm. But the business has grown, and I think the most powerful thing for us, and so when we talk to different stakeholders, when we talk to the regulator, the Gambling Commission, we have different consultations with various people. the biggest thing that comes out and that people comment on is about the model that we built, and that is lived experience. So we have a pool of facilitators who are all lived experience. My story, yes, it's sad, but obviously inspiring in terms of where I've come. But with, for instance, an example of one of our facilitators is that it's in the public domain, so it's fine. He stole 370 grand from his employer over a 3-year period and went to prison for 3 years. He'd done 18 months, but when he tells his story, if he's at a school, because obviously they do the majority of facilitating for red card, I've had to step back a little bit because obviously I'm 1,000,001 things to do. But when Ben tells his story, it's absolutely incredible because, he's turned his life around to do what he's doing today now. And the other members of the team that are serious lived experience, I think is a powerful learning tool. And I think, particularly in young people, there's this common theme that, generally speaking, young people don't really want to hear about a professor from university, for example, blowing out stats for an hour. Yeah, they want to hear from people who've walked in those shoes. They want to hear the details. And myself and my team, we're lucky and we're blessed that we're able to tell our story, because obviously it's not easy. There's thousands that are not able to revisit the trauma that they've been through, and that's fine, and we totally understand that. But myself and the team that we've got, they're passionate about raising awareness and sharing our story, and we're lucky we can do that. So yeah, we deliver all across the country, nationwide. We've got projects in the Midlands where we're based now. So for example, we've got 10 workshops that we do with North Warwickshire Council at the moment. We're on the 7th one with them. We've got a football project, which again close to my heart, semi-professional football project. So local clubs like Nuneaton and Coventry Spinks and Bedworth United and Kettering, all these local clubs have had the benefit of having us come into their academy players, and it's amazing because they're 16 to 19, and it's amazing just telling them our story and educating them, because obviously they just started going on this gambling journey. They just started opening their gambling apps, and they just need to be told where this could lead them. And it's powerful. The feedback we do our evaluation after every workshop with feedback forms, and we have a real powerful, real positive feedback from every delivery we've had. We've been endorsed by the government, by MPs, etc. So yeah, the project is really, really, really going well. Obviously, it takes more funding. So the lottery has supported us, the Gambling Commission supported us, and one or two others. So we'll just continue growing as a team and reaching as many people as we can in terms of education awareness. The workshops are online or in person, so we do both. So lots of companies, particularly local authorities like Warwickshire, like Islington, like Haringey, we deliver them online, and then others obviously prefer it in person, so we give them the choice. And majority of the work that we deliver is free, not all of it. The majority, because some things aren't free, like the schools, for instance, they have to pay a fee because gambling awareness is part of the school curriculum now. It's part of the PSHE program.
Oh, is it really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so they have to pay a fee for our delivery, and most of them have been fine with that. And then we've got a training program for professionals, CPD gambling awareness training course for professionals, which is about 3 or 4 hours, and that's for companies and businesses and employees and etc. So there's a hell of a lot going on.
When you visit those football clubs, those academies, it must feel like talking to your younger self, I imagine. Do you ever sort of see those youngsters and sort of recognise that was you? And of course, it really struck me, actually, you talked about their apps. Of course, that wasn't something, as you said yourself, that was available, back in the 80s, 90s or whatever. And yet here they are with gambling in their pocket, in the palm of their hand, the ability and opportunity. It's accessible, it's affordable, isn't it? It's a different beast altogether, I imagine now, in some ways.
Yeah, 100%, because the whole landscape of gambling has changed from my day in the 90s to where we are today with the introduction of online gambling. And you are exactly right what you're saying in terms of the accessibility and opportunity, 24/7 casino in your pocket, basically. And that's the scary thought for me. From the football side of things, there is, as we know, a hell of a lot of money in football these days. So if, for example, if someone's Arsenal or Tottenham or wherever it is, one of the big clubs, as a first year professional. So they've finished their scholarship, they've turned 18, they get their first professional contract. They'll be on average about £5 a week. And that's an 18-year-old. So, but they're still going to have their same friends and they're still going to be doing the same thing. So once they're on their gambling apps, it's so easy just to blow away that money. They're not going to be used to managing money. So all of a sudden they're on £5 a week. They're a professional now. Yeah. So that's the danger. They've got to be educated about. They've got to be educated about what, money management, staying away from gambling. That's where gambling addiction can actually take you. And that's why it's important that they hear it from people with lived experience, so they can actually literally see it. When I'm playing the slides, there's a couple of things where I've got my goal, for instance, scoring at Anfield in 1991, playing for Stoke. And yes, it's exciting from an all round. They're looking at someone that scored at Anfield because that's their dream. They want to score at Anfield. But I'm also saying to them, that's how life used to be. That's how life started out for me. That's how life was when I was 22. I was scoring at Anfield, all the adulation, all the glamour that comes with professional football. But then, where was I 6-7 years later? So we just have to highlight the dangers. Really important.
And like you say, these young people with an expendable income that so many of their friends won't have, but they've got that money to spare. So it's quite a potent sort of combination, isn't it? Youth and money together, when you think of it in those terms, I suppose.
Yeah, and I think that's the important bit when we talk to professionals, particularly yourselves and others, in terms of therapy and psychotherapists and that. In terms of us not maturing, in terms of whether we're 24 or 25 when the brain develops. So you can imagine when you've got a lot of money, disposable income at 18, 19, and the advertising that comes with it, the exposure of gambling, the fact that it's endorsed by celebrities and endorsed by top footballers. So 18, 19, all you're going to be thinking, that's okay, everyone does it, it's normal. So that's the mindset that a lot of young people have got.
Yeah, and the impulsivity, you're so right, of a young adult or a teenager in terms of brain development, just that not thinking, just doing things spontaneously often. You said that you were lucky to be in that position, you and your team, how lucky you are to be in that position to offer that insight and to offer that advice and support to people, but how lucky they are to be on the receiving end and to have somebody like yourself with the organisation, the charity that you're running, telling your story, especially when considering, as you've highlighted today, you kept it so quiet for so long, the shame that kept the lid on that, and that meant you were keeping that all to yourself, and now here you are, sharing that for the benefit of others. What an extraordinary story, Tony. I know we started the conversation by me acknowledging that I absolutely, storytelling is within our DNA as human beings. And I think most of us would understand the power of telling a story and how much easier that can get a message across in such a powerful way to people. But at the same time, when it's your story that you're telling over and over again, how that could be for some people, revisiting trauma, revisiting difficult times. So how amazing that you are able to do that for people. When you sit there, we're nearly at the end of our hour's conversation now. How does it feel today telling that? Do you recognise just how far you've come? Are you able to feel comfortable in yourself now you've got to this stage and tell that story without feeling that trauma and that upset again?
Yeah, I definitely feel 100% comfortable. I do it on lots of different platforms, whether it's TV, whether it's radio, whether it's in public. I've done God knows how many talks now. So I'm blessed and lucky that I've got to a place where I'm very comfortable in sharing my story. I'm passionate about sharing my story. And I think in terms of how do I feel, and am I aware of where I've been to where I am today, I think when people tell me, like yourself and other friends and people that didn't know about the gambling addiction. People that I've met in Coventry, old friends, etc. They say, "Oh, I didn't know you went through that. It's amazing what you're doing today." And then when the book comes out, they say, "God, I can't believe it, Tony, you wrote a book. Your story is incredible." And so then that's when I start thinking, wow, yeah, when you think about it, I suppose it is incredible. I suppose it is a bit crazy, considering where I've been, yeah. And I think just to touch upon a note that's really important in terms of gambling-related suicide, because when I look back to particularly when the breakdown of the 20-year with the relationship, and then having the house repossessed, and then obviously the serious debt and mental health issues are going through, I always say to myself, wow, how did I not want to take my own life? And we work with charity Gambling with Lives, not work with them, but we collaborate with them. Their parents that set up the charity in terms of losing their son to gambling-related suicide. So I like to mention that because we are at reality today. People do lose their lives, and unfortunately I didn't get to that place where I want to take my own life. And so, yeah, we have to really acknowledge that this is a serious mental health disorder and it's impacting hundreds of thousands of people. And sadly, for some, yeah, they will unfortunately feel there's no hope left, and yeah, they will take their own lives. So I just wanted to highlight that because that's where we are today.
That's so important. I know when we were exchanging emails before today, that we both recognise the fact that we're recording this on the 9th of September and that tomorrow is World Suicide Prevention Day. And the link between gambling and suicide, as you've just said, is actually a pretty strong one. And I think it's also important for people to understand that gambling is, I think I'm right, please correct me if I'm wrong, but the fastest growing addiction. So if you think of those two stats together, again, that's a very toxic and worrying combination. And it's really important to highlight the importance of gambling awareness and support so that the impact of suicide, doesn't become something that continues to increase also.
Yeah. And that's why I was pleased with one of the changes that came in approximately 18 months ago is the fact that gambling awareness is part of the PSHE program in secondary schools. So that was a good move and a good change of direction. So people that are from year 7 to 13, whatever it is, will have the opportunity, whether it's red card. I know there's not many educators out there, but we'll go into as many schools as possible because early intervention and education of young people is key. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you to Tony, founder of Red Card Gambling, for joining me today, and thank you for listening in. If you would like to know more about the work Tony and his team do promoting awareness and prevention of problem gambling, then the links you'll need are in the show notes below. This podcast is brought to you by the National Counselling and Psychotherapy Society, a professional home for counsellors, psychotherapists, and over 120 wellbeing organisations across the UK. Autonomy, diversity, creativity, and community are at the heart of what we do. We are creating a positive space for conversations with people who share common beliefs and goals, because together, our voice is louder. If you would like to know more about the NCPS, please visit www.ncps.com for more information. And please remember to follow and subscribe so you are always part of the conversation.